the reaction was, largely positive, but I think some people certainly felt pressure. And I said, I want you to try to walk out the door at 1 o'clock. But if you can't do that, throw time at it until you can. But really what we were changing is I want you to start thinking a couple hours every day about how you work, not just working, but how are you working?
Welcome, everybody. Today, I am geeking out. I have one of the people I've wanted to have on the show for a long time, Stephan Aarstol. He is the founder of Tower Paddleboards and Tower Electric Bikes. He's one of the biggest success stories of Shark Tank, the series, and he's the author of the 5-Hour Workday. And first of all, thank you for coming out today, Stephan. So glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show, Wayne. I appreciate it.
So one of the things that really excited me, and again, I read your book quite a few years back, and what I love is what you're looking to do, not just for the sake of productivity, but helping create something better than simply work for work's sake, as Tim Ferriss might say it, or having something more of meaning. Could you share with people who are not as familiar with what you're doing, just a little bit about what you did with creating a 5-hour workday in your company and why you started doing that when things were going so well? Why did you even mess with it? Most guys don't like to mess with things. Why did you even bother?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of liked experimentation and just the nature of startups today. I'm always very contrarian thinker. I'm like, if everybody is doing something this way, that's probably the wrong way to do it, in today's world. So I always think like that. We think like that in sort of business strategy with what we do. And in about 2015, in I think May or June or something like that, that's when we started the 5-Hour Workday. We did it as an experiment. We were going to do it for 3 months initially, working 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. straight through, get rid of lunch. And the idea was I was trying to sort of attract and retain sort of the people that work at 3 times the speed of everybody else. So I was renegotiating with labor in a sense. And the idea was this is kind of how I had worked the last 10 or 15 years, prior to that. And all my entrepreneurial buddies were kind of working like that. They come into the office, head down, get your workout. But it's not like you're trying to be the first one in the parking lot and the last one to leave. So you get a promotion, whether or not you do anything. It was productivity focused, and I wanted to create a company culture like that. And so that was one part of it. And the other part of it was so the company I had on Shark Tank was called towerpaddleboards.com, and direct to consumer paddleboards. And that company had a good run. So in 2014, we were the #1 fastest growing private company in San Diego. With 5 people, we're doing $5 million. We're beating, biotech companies and these big venture funded capital companies. And then in 2015, we were number 239 on the Inc. 500. So we had proved, we could grow. We said, okay, well, we got that, but how do we make this a really big brand? How do we make $100 million brand out of this? And I started reading about branding. One of the big things was you had to basically live your brand. And we weren't doing that. We were a beach lifestyle company 2 blocks from the beach, but we were working like a startup. So we wanted to do an experiment, and it was really just going to be a test for 3 months to get people. And when I did it, it wasn't just, okay, here, have this extraordinary life. It was, we're going to work 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. straight through, no lunch. But you've got to figure out how to be as productive as you were before, or you'll be fired. So I'm going to give you your life back, but at the same time, I'm going to put pressure on you, which I was trying to emulate, the pressure that is on entrepreneurs. Like if you do this and you knock it out of the park, you're going to have an extraordinary life, but you always have this sort of threat hanging over your head if you're going to go out of business. So that keeps you going. So that's what we did. And then it ended up working pretty well. We increased revenues 50% that year. We continue to do it for 2 years. That's been 5 years ago now, and there have been some problems, but that's kind of how it rolled out.
Awesome. Yeah. One of the things when people ask me, I do a lot of work around 3-day weekends or 4-day work weeks. And I had read Tim Ferriss's book quite a while ago. I've followed Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach, for over 25 years. So I'm very familiar with a lot of these concepts. And I just figured, gosh, even for a lot of people, a 4-day work week or a 5-hour workday, something that's, just less, a little bit less would make a big deal out of people. And yet a lot of people say to me, well, Wade, then should employers give it to their employees? And my answer has always been no, because we don't know what we're going to get back. It's still math. And that's the thing I think a lot of people, when they hear what you're talking about or what I'm talking about, say, oh, so this is a socialism. It's like, no, this is very much grounded in math. If you can't do the productivity, we don't want it. But like you said, the cost of employee turnover, finding the best people who, as you know, I know you mentioned a lot of the 80-20 thinking and the different ideas that some people can produce 5, 10, 15 times what other people produce, that it's still got to be grounded in reality. How did you keep things grounded in reality, and how did your employees respond when you first started doing this?
Yeah, so one interesting thing I want to touch on there first, because you brought up, Tim Ferriss's the 4-Hour Work Week, and of course I read that, and that sort of changed my life, and it changed a lot of entrepreneurs' life. And the reason it did it is focused on the individual, right? It's about you opting out of this crazy work world, and then outsourcing, and then getting all these other people to do your bidding. So it's so you say the question comes up of, should you do this for your staff? And you're like, no, this would be crazy. They're who I need to afford this lifestyle myself. But to me, it occurred to me, I'm like, well, what if I could just build an entire company of people just like me or my entrepreneurial friends? That would be we would have superpowers. And so that's why it was an experiment, but it was not an easy experiment to do. It's a very uncomfortable experiment, because at the time I'm hiring kids right out of school. I'm paying them in, San Diego, California, $36,000 a year to start. I tell them, this is, a work to learn. This is a startup environment. Mark Cuban is of the opinion, Mark Cuban's, a 30% owner of the company. So he sort of advises on some stuff. He's of the opinion that people should pay him to work for him because they're getting so much value out of it. I don't go quite to that extreme, but I'm kind of like, look, you're a young kid. If you're smart, you're going to work to learn. You're not going to work so you can make 10,000 more than your buddies and spend it on stupid stuff. So that's kind of where that came from. Give me your question one more time, because I kind of sidetracked there.
No, and that's so huge. That's just a real quick thing. One of the things that I've learned in a similar way is I look back at different people, and I know my father's an entrepreneur. When he started a business, it really was just sink or swim in the business model he was in. And more over the years, people have made it a little easier for people to succeed, but then you sometimes take away that entrepreneurial edge. And the person who doesn't get that they should apprentice somewhere. I mean, I'm a 20-year entrepreneur. Last year, a friend of mine who does online virtual summits, I wanted to learn how he does them. He does them at a huge scale. I apprenticed in his company to help him run the event. It's not a humility thing. It's not an ego thing. It's, if I want to learn, I can help. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. Question was, how did your employees respond to oh, wow, this sounds awesome, and then the accountability part of it?
It was a bit of a shock to the employees. They were like, wow, this is exciting, but different segments. And we had, like our warehousing department where they had to ship the stuff and they had to unload containers and do stuff like that. And they were like, well, yeah, this sounds like really great for you guys that sit behind the computer. You're not really working anyways, in their minds. And they said, but we got to ship out the same number of packages and probably 50% more because we're growing. It's really ain't going to work for us. I said, look, figure it out. And that's the beauty of the 5-hour workday. It doesn't just work for certain types of things. It really works for everybody. And we didn't bring in efficiency experts and say, how do we refine our systems? You just said, you're your own efficiency expert, which is exactly the motivation that is put upon an entrepreneur. It's like, you figure out how to do it faster, and then you get to walk out the door. And so that's what we did. And they magically figured out, using the same software. It's because we were already a tech company. We weren't like some backwoods company that all of a sudden was going to find productivity. We were already a very productive company. So they were already using, ShipStation, and, our warehouse was set up pretty good, but they, timed it, and they were doing, one package per 5 minutes. We're not Amazon here with robots running around, but, it was one package per 5 minutes was what it came out to. And then they measured it, and then they said, well, let's move this product over here, let's do this. They started to do some of that like spaghetti stuff, some basically management theory that your shipping guys wouldn't usually do, right? And then they said, well, let's dig into this software. What can we do? And they basically learned to use the software how it was supposed to be used. And that, in my opinion, is where the huge productivity gains come today. It's like the person who knows how to use Excel, and then the person who really knows how to use Excel. Like, you can just move it, 10 times the speed. And that's really the company culture that we developed. Okay, so in the shipping department, they got that down to 2.6 minutes per package. And that was within 2 months. And okay, we had been going along for 5 years, just like this. So that to me just shows, like, basically they were wasting half their time. And that's in a very physical labor environment. If you go really to a purely like knowledge environment, I mean, it's unbelievable, the amount of waste that we were doing. And really, going to 5 hours wasn't that uh, extreme, in my opinion. Before that, we were a 9 to 5 company with an hour lunch. That's a 7 hour day. I don't know where the 8 hour day comes from, but that's a 7 hour day because you have an hour off for lunch. And then, some people do lunch at their desk for half an hour, and some people, go out for, an hour and a half and have, martinis or whatever. And then you've got, where am I going to eat for lunch? So you got some wasted time up front, and then you come back and you have, depending on what you ate, you have this food coma. So you're probably wasting 2 hours. So to me, I was like, I'm just getting rid of lunch here is basically all we're doing. And I'm going to have them focus, for 5 hours straight. But the reaction was, largely positive, but I think some people certainly felt pressure. And I said, I want you to try to walk out the door at 1 o'clock. But if you can't do that, throw time at it until you can. But really what we were changing is I want you to start thinking a couple hours every day about how you work, not just working, but how are you working? And I think interesting, like with the pandemic here, what we did is we created an artificial constraint within the company. And the reason we did that, and we thought that would work, the experiment, because that's why startups work. That's why 3 guys in a garage, upset, $100 million company, because they don't have any money, they don't have any resources, and they have no choice but to creatively think about how to do something differently, right? And so that constraint is what gives startups power. And this is kind of one thing I've learned from Cuban is I'm always complaining to him about, well, just give me like $1 million line of credit and I'll blow this thing up. We're cash constrained here. And he's like, look, kid, like everybody is cash constrained. He's like, figure out a creative solution. And so those constraints create better things. So that's really, what we did there. And I think people are uncomfortable with constraints. So that's kind of the employee reaction you get, but then they're excited about walking out the door. So overall, I would say it was a pretty good reaction, but it also exposed some people. I mean, we really did fire some people because they weren't as productive, and all of a sudden they couldn't hide behind hours anymore. So it was definitely a change on that front.
Yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of people, I talk with our kids. Our kids are about to be 15 and 12. The idea of forcing people to eat their vegetables. And sometimes in my experience with employees, you have to set regulations because you try the first time to say, okay, well, let's let you figure this out. And just the same way as I can't remember stuff really well, and to implement, I'm just a moron at that, but I'm really good at creative things. There's other people that have almost the exact opposite skills. Like, okay, if you tell me what to do, I can do it really, really well, but I'm not going to create it and I'm not going to think of it. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, I mean, I love what you're talking about, just trying to make it more entrepreneurial. One of the things I do with the software company I have is have a compensation software that tries to reward team members to be entrepreneurial. And it's still so interesting that they still almost want the boundaries at times, some employees, of, okay, certainty or these hours, and there's a fear of things going away. But overall, as I try to remind them, I'm sure you do, is the market is really what's at stake here. It's not whether or not Stephan decides to be a nice guy and pay you or not. Ultimately, if the market kicks Stephan's butt, then there's no money there. So this is about trying to operate with real forces, not just something that is contrived. How did this experiment impact the lives of your team members, your employees, and you once they were able to start doing this?
Well, yeah, and ultimately this experiment I would consider as a failure. I mean, there were things about it that were successful, but like last year we didn't do the 5-hour workday at all. After the first year, we did the 3-month trial and it worked so well, we continued it for 2 years. But then things started to fall apart in certain areas, and there were some unintended circumstances. So we went to summers only, and we didn't do it during the pandemic. I mean, there were other reasons there. The company was, about to implode, and then you had the pandemic on top of that. But then we doubled revenues, and then now going forward, we're doing it for 4 months every year, but only in following years where we've grown revenues. So if revenues are going down, okay, let's roll up our sleeves, let's double down, and let's work. If things are going well, and they're going well because that team that is the existing team on the field created it, here's your company bonus, you get the 5-hour workday. So we're having to earn it every day. So what you bring up exactly is very important. You can't really change human nature. Like, you can't force people to be entrepreneurial just because you say, I want you guys to try to be more entrepreneurial. doesn't work. I mean, like some people are going to be and some people are not going to be. So, with the 5-hour workday, we wanted some people to be just sort of more productive people. And a lot of people that didn't have like work training or work history, they were able to do it. But then a lot of people that had worked like an hourly job were not able to do it. It very quickly became just like, we have a 5-hour workday and I'm going to work the same way I've always worked and just over 5 hours. and then, they would work on the weekend and they would, maybe they had to go to a boat show or some event or whatever. And they'd say, well, I put in my 12 hours there, so I'm going to take 4 days off now. Just like this is not how it goes. Like, this is still a salary job. Like, you may still have to put in a 12-hour day. If we have, a couple containers come in and we've got to hustle. And that was a hard thing for people to wrap their head around. Some people, the other people were like, of course. I had, one employee in my company. He has a 5-hour workday. He's a surfer here. And I believe he had a girlfriend at the time. He volunteered to go live in China in the factory for 6 months, on a cot, working 6 12-hour days in the factory because he wanted to, educate him more on the manufacturing process of surfboards. And so this is what you're trying to bring into your company, is people like this, that you give them a better deal and they see this as, what it is. This is an opportunity for me. And, I only have to work this limited amount and the rest is sort of voluntary. And some people take it that way and some people, took it totally a different way.
Did you find people in any way adjusted their lifestyle costs? I know San Diego is not a cheap place. One of the things when I talk to people in general is, look, if you can't at least look at your lifestyle expenses, if somebody says, hey, I'd like you to, I'm offering you an opportunity, can you take the same hourly and work less hours? That was one of the first things I proposed to a corporation I worked for 20 years ago. Is, hey, can I just work 4 days and make 80% of the income? In essence, I want the same hourly. Can I just do that? And at the time it was no, because if you do it, everybody else is going to have to do it and whatnot. But I think a lot of people lose sight of this. Just like you said, the entitlement, like once it becomes, well, 5 hours is now the new 8 hours. And like, oh, I'm so exhausted at 5 hours. And oh my gosh, I have to work 5 hours in 1 minute. How did people even adjust their lifestyle expenses, or did they even consider that as one of the variables that they could consider?
Yeah, well, they didn't really have to in this model, because everybody was paid on a salary. So it wasn't like we were going to pay 70%. About a year after we wrote the book, Amazon came out with a test where they did that. They said, okay, we're going to do a workplace experiment. And they said, we'll pay you 75% of your wages and you'll only have to work 32 hours. It wasn't really an experiment. They were just doing part-time work. I mean, but the experiment that we wanted to do is pay people the same, but squeeze their hours. And the magic math of a startup was, this didn't cost us any more money, right? And to the employees, if you looked at it, we almost doubled their salary. They went from making $40,000 a year. That's basically $20 an hour if you're working 2,000 hours a year, 40 days a week. If all of a sudden you're working a 25-hour week, it's like 1,250 hours over that same. And then we also rolled out like profit sharing. So they came out to making like $38 an hour after that, if you're looking at just your hourly wage. And this was a big thing in the Tim Ferriss's book, was it's about input and output. So you're really trying to, as an entrepreneur, maximize your hourly wage. And that's sort of an important thing. And so we were doing that for the employees. I don't know if that just sort of went right over their head, but that's what we were trying to do. It was, in your prior question, you said, how did people's lives sort of change? That was one thing, that was one of the unintended circumstances. So all of a sudden you're walking out of the door at 1 o'clock. After 2 years of this experiment, or just, prior to 2 years, we had about a 9-person company, and I lost 4 of the 9 people within a 90-day period. One of them I fired, so that one was kind of my fault. But the other 3 people, and they were pretty senior people in the company, they left. And so there was just like mass exodus all at once. Okay, now these are people that have a 5-hour workday. So they're making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, and they're in their 20s. I mean, this is, the first job, because even though we start them low, we move them up really fast if they're sort of, rock star employees. And so these people were leaving, and I was just like, okay, well, what's going on here? Something's not working, because we're still able to get good people in here, but we're not able to retain them. So that part of the 5-hour workday didn't work. And really what had happened is people's outer lives had, I would say, improved. So you're walking out at 1, and you can use that time however you want. So this gets back to your question about, for finances, how did that change? So if these people wanted to make more money, they could just drive Uber, because you could convert that extra time however you want. I was, a single father at the time. My son was, playing baseball. So I basically caught all of his games all of a sudden. Like I could go hit a game at, 4 o'clock. So, you use that time how you want to use it. A lot of these kids were like young kids, just out of college, and they wanted to spend more time on their, relationships. Well, I think those relationships improved and got better because a lot of those people left the company to, move to Mexico or go, van across America with their loved one. So it was a positive in the rest of people's lives for the company. And I was looking at this, not just improving their lives, but I wanted to improve the company too. So I think it was a negative on the company because we lost some of our company culture. When we were a startup, working long hours, you're kind of working in the trenches together. And that forms these really strong bonds with people. And it's hard to leave a company like that. I think when people leave a company, they're not so much leaving the company as they're leaving the people they work with. So I thought maybe we broke the company culture. And I think we had. So it became very easy to leave this company because the rest of your life was great. So that's good for employees, but that doesn't serve the goals of the company. Not a lot of companies are going to follow my lead if I tell them this is the future of your company, right? So that didn't work for us. So that's why we did the twist where we tweaked the experiment and we said summers only. We did it from June 1st to the end of September. That's when we do 70% of our revenue, and we squeeze people for time there because that was a huge benefit, is that putting pressure on people and just making them sweat it out and figure out how to work faster. And then in the off season, we went back to startup hours where we were doing more project-based stuff to, prep for the year, build the business development type stuff. And so we try to get the benefits of both of those.
That's cool. One of the things I find a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, maybe even more solopreneurs, smaller business owners, 8 to 10, 20 people as employees, when I'll ask them, why aren't you taking Fridays off? And not every Friday, just even Fridays off in general, or during summer, because some people are in, a part of the country where it's cold most of the year and summer comes. I mean, heck, you're in Chicago, one of the nicest places on the planet, 3 months out of the year. And a lot of them couldn't come up with a reason why. Like they just had not developed their life outside. And so the default was, well, okay, I have nothing to do on Friday. I guess I'll just go back to work. And that's the part that, like you say, there's in any arena, I guess there's striving for excellence, whether it's as an athlete. As I tell people, look, I want to hustle for 4 days and do awesome. And I want to create a great family life and a great personal life 3 days. And yet, as you know, you can't make people do that. And one of the most interesting things to me also, and now I'm hearing what you're saying, what's been going on, is having come from the insurance industry and certainly knowing most employers know what, the cost of employee turnover, how just devastating it is to a business to retrain people and just the downtime and all that stuff. And one of the common challenges is, what do you do with that person who's like a 7.5 or an 8 out of a 10, but they're never going to leave you? And it's tough because it's like, okay, well, that's steady, that's bankable. It's not stellar, it's not top shelf, but you can really build a lot off of that. What would you say in that conversation, as you start looking at what you've learned, does that person who is, loyal, willing to contribute, but not able, let's say, intellectually, just not as sharp or, whatever it is, not able to do things, are you finding that this new way of doing things is more creating a place for that person who wants to help, but maybe just isn't a top performer?
Yeah, I think it's not. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to get rid of those people. But the problem is, and we did this in 2015, and this company, Tower Paddleboards, was started in 2010. And that was the time all of the direct-to-consumer brand, Warby Parker, and those were started about that same time. And the reason we were able to do that, impressive growth, is because it was a really good hiring market in 2010. I mean, I could go out and hire people. I mean, there was huge unemployment. It was a crazy economy. We were just coming out of it. And so I was like, man, I'm just getting incredible people here to work. 2015, we're near full employment. It's not as easy to get people. So I'm like, how do I get back to hiring those great people? And so I think that was critical for a small company. Like, right now our company is 5 people. We're hiring a 6th person. We'll do about 6 million in revenue this year. But to have a company like that, you can't have those 7.5s or 8s. You have to have, you have to have 9s, and you have to fire the 8s. So that's kind of what we had to do. I'll touch on one thing you mentioned there about the 4-day week and taking Fridays off. So the point of this experiment wasn't to write a book initially. We started the experiment in 2015. The book published in, I guess, 2016. But I was writing articles. I'd always written articles in, some magazines, Inc. and Forbes and stuff like this, just sort of their online stuff, as about what we were doing as a startup, because we were a Shark Tank company and we got some press with that. And, I wasn't much of a writer, and most of these articles wouldn't get huge, like shares or follows or stuff like that. But then I started writing about the experiment we were doing with the 5-hour workday. And that first one got 10,000 social shares. So just like hugely viral, hugely just resonated with people. Because I think everybody realized, we're getting a couple hours of work done at the office. We're all just wasting each other's time. Like, what are we doing? Like, people just knew that, right? And so we decided, okay, we're going to write a book about this. So we wrote the 4-hour workday. And then the idea was we're going to put a book in every paddleboard that we shipped out. And so, because it aligned, it dovetailed with our business brand, this beach lifestyle company, work hard, play hard. And then, if people would sort of resonate with our company, they would like our company, they would tell other people, and that would build our brand. So that was, the intent there. But what in writing the book, I had to go back and study work. Like, how did, the world work? How has it we worked over time? Do we work different in different countries? And it was fascinating what I found. And one thing I found was the 8-hour workday was invented in like 1913. And so essentially you had the Industrial Revolution come along, and you had, these sort of factory lines, the assembly line. And all of a sudden the factory owners said, wow, like, we can massively increase productivity. Let's work these workers longer. So the machines could go 24 hours a day, and they started to have people try to work them 24 hours a day. And I mean, they got pretty close. They were doing 12 hours, and then 14 hours, and then 16-hour days. But in the early 1900s, they had a problem. Huge turnover. Like at a Ford Motor Company factory, they had 70% turnover of employees. And this is nationwide. I believe one half of the workforce was either dying or being maimed on the factory floors. So there was a huge health problem, because the world had changed, productivity had changed, and they're just saying, okay, we're going to have these people just try to keep up with this. And that's where he changed it. He said, okay, we need to do something different here. So that's where the 8-hour workday came from. They had 3 8-hour shifts. So the humans would work 8 hours, and initially it was 6 days a week. And then the machines would go 24 hours a day. And so that was designed for this factory floor. Fast forward 100 years, we're working an 8-hour workday. Why? Because it works good in factories. I mean, what percentage of the US population works in factories? Like none, right? And then the workday is very different around the world. Mexico, I had no idea. I'm 20 minutes from Mexico. Mexico works 6 days a week, 8-hour days. They work 48-hour work week. Some European countries work, 35-hour weeks. In China, they got the 996. They're working 6 days a week, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Like, it's so different in every part of the world, right? So, but when I challenged, and when we wrote that book and I did sort of a press tour, like, the people that booked me were a lot of very conservative, media that brought me on to debunk this socialistic, BS. Because it was offensive to them that anybody would challenge the 8-hour workday. And I'm like, it was just invented, right? And it was invented for a much different time. Like, we should at least be thinking about, and they were actually very responsive to that. They're like, oh, I didn't really know that. So it was an educational process for me as well. But one thing that I learned, and this wasn't like a master plan from the beginning, but what is the assembly line of today? And in my opinion, the assembly line of today is an information assembly line. We have the information age. That is the new industrial revolution. It's the information revolution. So today it's about passing information. I reach out to you, or I reach out to my overseas manufacturer, and they get back to me the next day, the customers, and you do all of this. And the faster that information can flow, the more productive you can be. And the more tools you use to automate that productivity of information, the better. That's like an e-commerce store. People can buy stuff on our store without ever talking to us, right? and the store is open 24 hours a day. It doesn't require staff and all of this. This is how we can be a 6-person company and do 6 million in revenue. And this is why when we won, the fastest growing company in San Diego, everybody was like, well, I don't get it. Like, there's 5 of you, like, you're a surf company. Like, they don't even think a surf company is a real company in San Diego. And I'm like, look, like, the world has changed. Okay. But that is the assembly line of today, this information flow. So everybody knows when they get back into office on Monday, it's kind of like you're underwater for half a day as you dig out your emails. You're basically starting up this engines of information flow again. And it comes to a screeching halt Friday afternoon, and then you restart it. So all of the entrepreneurs that I know that are successful, they work a couple hours a day, like 6-7 days a week. Even when they're on vacation, they'll just do an hour of clearing their email or doing something like that. And a lot of people look at those people and they say, oh, these are workaholics, right? They can't even get away. They can't even enjoy their vacation. And I'm kind of like, yeah, well, I'm in the Bahamas and you're back there working. I think I understand what I'm doing here. But the idea is to be productive. Now, I think you got to work a little bit every day. That's why when you go home, field a couple emails in the evening. Shrink the time that you're actually in the office. That was the concept with the 5-hour workday. But you kind of work all the time. So at the time we wrote the book, France made a law. They made a law that employers couldn't contact their employees after 5 p.m. So they said, like, look, you're working us all the time. We've got cell phones now. Employers are taking advantage of workers. So we're not going to allow them to contact these employees. No work after work hours. And then other countries, and Microsoft did an experiment in Japan with a 4-day work week. And Japan was like a work crazy. It's worse than the US, right? But I think that's the exact wrong solution, because that doesn't work for the assembly line of information. If you go to 4 days and you shut down for 3 days, all of a sudden you have to start up those engines, and you have this even a longer break in there. If you have any project you're working on, if that person goes on vacation, it's like a block to productivity, because you can't get anything past there. So it's kind of like they've forced everybody to be on their vacation. So that's the problem you've got to solve, and you've got to try to be productive, consistently. So my thought was, you just shrink down the regular day, but you still field some stuff in the email, field some stuff on the weekend. And that's why we felt that was successful. And that's why I think a lot of these 3-day work week or 4-day work week, they're designing that just from the socialistic element. Yeah, sure, that is absolutely going to improve people's lives, but it's going to be problematic for your business.
Yeah, definitely one of the things I've looked into, and the reason why I will do, well, first of all, I used to take a very rigid, dogmatic definition of 3-day weekends, that I wouldn't touch anything. I have a software business. Almost nothing happens on Friday. My clients have gotten used to that nothing happens. I get to play beach volleyball for about 5 to 6 hours in the morning. I still check my email at about 3 p.m. in case something's exploding. To your point, it takes me 15 minutes. Now, I don't check it at 8 a.m. because if I check it at 8 a.m., I'll be thinking about the whole time I'm at the beach. So I'll let that go, because again, I was just on email the night before, very often late until Thursday. And this is the other part, is I tell people, look, I'm still getting in 32, 36 hours. If we have a 3-day week, because it's two holidays or whatever, I still find myself working 30, 35 hours a week, because that's just kind of my creative rhythm or whatever it is.
Sure.
And certainly in my case, I give myself the luxury to say, okay, well, on weekends, I'm going to work on passion projects that don't make money, but I still create stuff. So to your point, and I'm an author and I write books on parenting, spirituality, personal finance, different things. So I'll say, okay, well, on the weekend, I'm not going to make money off of spirituality. So I'll write on that. That's not work. That's sort of like this dogmatic definition. At the end of the day, yes, I'm still creative. One of our teachers used to say, what? Don't go on vacation. Don't vacate your brain for summer. She goes, go summer recreation. And to your point, just absolutely stopping cold turkey. I agree with you. I don't fully even take to that, because I almost feel guilty. Like, well, I want to think, I want to do something. And why would that shift? So if someone were to come to you today and say, okay, look, I'd like to do this thing in my company. I like the spirit of what you're doing. And for the three main reasons I see is, employee retention, hopefully. And again, there's some, as you said, there's some interesting things that happen there that you didn't maybe anticipate. Productivity, and then whether you want to call it work-life balance, harmony, long-term happiness, that sort of stuff. What would you tell somebody today that is looking to do that, an employer that says, yes, I'm open to doing this, I want to do this, what would they be best to start doing, and what do they need to look out for?
Yeah, my recommendation is don't do it full time. Don't go to commit to like year round. I think it would be an absolute disaster if like a countrywide they just said we're switching to the 5-hour workday, because people would get entitled very quickly and they would just start like working like they're working on the 8-hour workday, 5 hours a day. There's no magic about 5 hours versus 8 hours versus 12 hours. It doesn't matter, because the nuclear power you have in front of you, all of these productivity tools, all of the connectivity also allows you to waste time. I mean, you have kids. I don't know if your kids are doing remote school over there in Florida, but here in California, it's an absolute disaster, because you have these kids like, zooming into their classes, and then they're, watching TikTok on their phone. And my son's completely failing out of high school, and he has the capability to do very well in high school, but it's not working, right? Because the same tools that allow this productivity allow you to waste time. And that's the work environment that we work in. So what I would recommend, and I think this can benefit any company, is I would do the summer experiment. Do it for just 3 months and say, okay, I'm going to give you 3 months, and then we're going back to regular work for the rest of time. But enjoy your summer. We're going to go 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. straight through, no lunch. And if you can't figure out how to be more productive, I'm going to fire you. And just leave that as the experiment and say, everybody's going to be like, oh, this is incredible. And maybe those workers will start thinking, man, if we really knock this out of the park, maybe he'll do this next summer. You haven't committed to it, right? And so what they will do is they'll force themselves to find productivity tools. They'll find ways to do their job faster. And then when you pull it off, you'll have magically trained your workforce to work at twice the speed they work at today. And I'm telling you, that will for sure work, because right now people, they're just throwing time at things, and they're not squeezed for time, and they don't have to use these productivity tools. And the waste is just incredible to when we were writing the book, I looked at studying the history of productivity in the US. Productivity between 1971 and 2011 for the US workforce went up 80%. Now, a lot of people look at that and they say, that's incredible. We almost doubled productivity, but I look at that and I'm like, my mom used to work in a bank in like the 80s, and I would go into her office, right? She had a typewriter, and I'd have to use a typewriter to write my, high school papers. And she had a typewriter. She had a computer on her desk, but it was one of those like bank computers that I don't know really what it did. It was just sort of an internal computer system. She would type letters and, mail them, put a stamp on them, mail them. She had a phone that attached to the wall, it would have meetings. It was like, holy, this is a crazy work environment. I'm like, what did you guys even do? If I look at our work environment today, if the internet goes out of our office, I just say, all right, let's just go home. It's pointless to even be here, right? And we still have like computers on our desk and all of these programs that we can do. Like there's a lot of stuff you could do, right? But it's not even working. Productivity with entrepreneurs is up for sure 1,000% in, from 71 to 2011. And if it's not, you're doing something completely wrong. So as a boss that has employees, I'm like angry that you've doubled productivity since the time where the phone used to be attached to the wall. Like that's craziness. And, you should be pissed off about that in the US, economy. And, everybody should just be pissed off about that. And we're not. And so that's really, what that was about. And you mentioned another thing a point that I wanted to touch on here. You said, you did this 4-day work week or whatever, and then it freed up time for you to pursue some hobby businesses even and stuff like that. That is actually one benefit that I think a lot of people can realize from this. And so when we, started the 5-hour workday, it was 2015, we grew revenues. We went from 5 million to 7.5 million. And the next year we did, I think, 7.2 million. I mean, other stuff was going on. We were in the paddleboard company. We had grown 2,800% in 4 years. So we were on this hyper growth company. You can't do that forever. It sort of leveled off. Everybody saw, we did it very publicly. So everybody saw what we did and copied what we did and threw more advertising dollars at it. And we started to come down, and we went down to 5.3 million and then 4.3 million. And we got off of Amazon. Amazon, took over the world, and we were adjusting to that. And what are we going to do? So we intentionally walked away from about 4.5 million, but that's a hard thing for a small company to do. But we were on this downhill slide. And then as we were doing that, I'm like, okay, I need to diversify. So when we were on the 5-hour workday in the summer, my staff went home, but I said, okay, it's 1 o'clock. now I'm going into business development mode. I started to work on other businesses. And that's really where we started, Tower Electric Bikes. And we moved our sort of offices. This was a cost-cutting measure. Instead of having our shop and offices on the main street, we ended up finding this kayak shop on the water. And we went in there, we rented that, and we put about $300,000 into it, turned it into an event space. So now, instead of paying rent for our office, we rent this event space out for $6,000 a day for our weddings, and we collect rent instead of pay rent. And we do pop-up retail within this, and we office out of the back of this. So these are all creative ideas that came in my off hours, because it was after the 5 hours. Okay, now I don't want to think about that anymore. And this was a strategy I actually learned, while reading Tim Ferriss's book in 2006, 2007, 2008. I had this poker chip company, and it did the same thing. It came up, and a lot of products online, they get commoditized. People see what you're doing, and they start to come down, right? And so I was trying to diversify, but it was hard to do that sitting at one computer. So I literally had one desk here, and I had one desk in a different room. And so I would spend part of my day in here. And at that time, it was like 12 hours a week I was spending on that business. And then I would go sit at my other desk and didn't have access to my email. And it was total business development. So that separation is an important thing you can do. So when you're asking, what can companies do? You shrink down, you have a 5-hour workday for your existing business, and then you're not allowed to work on any of that and do other stuff. There was another business that we created at that time, and it's been just sort of sitting there for about 2 years, because we're sort of correcting our revenue problems. And in 2020, we actually doubled revenue. So we're back in this growth trajectory now. And the e-bikes have just exploded. So it's kind of like we're in the paddleboards. Tower Electric Bikes is where Tower Paddleboards was in 2011. We could see the future here. Again, it's a direct-to-consumer brand. We sell them for about half price. So 2 years ago, when, again, we're on the 5-hour workday, I'm using off hours to start this business called nomiddleman.com, which is an aggregation of all the direct-to-consumer brands in the world. It's just sort of an information site, sort of an everything showroom. And you just go on there and who makes, who's the best company to make boots or whatever. Here's the 3 to 5, best direct-to-consumer brands. Click through, buy direct from them. And this is, we feel like the Amazon antidote, because Amazon was eating the world, it was eating us, and we said, how do we survive? So we created that thing. But the thing is, you don't create those things. If I just throw time at Tower Paddleboards and I just try to make it a little better, and I can do that a little bit, but you don't section off time. So that's why squeezing the time of that, it frees you up to do other stuff. And that's kind of what you were talking about with your hobby businesses.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I found is, you've probably seen this. A lot of people talk about, the average millionaire has 6 to 7 streams of income. And if you've been in business, the term serial entrepreneur is a dubious one, because sometimes it means a person just really messed up a lot, and sometimes it means they actually have multiple businesses. But
sounds a lot like serial killer too.
Exactly. That's the other thing. But so, for example, a software business that I still have, I didn't intend to start it, but it started, and customers pulled it from me, and I was smart enough to listen, thank God. And I run that in probably 1 day a week. And it's not one pretty day, but it's a couple hours a day. I can run at a certain time. And to your point, I segment, it's like, okay, here's this other venture. And each one of them is its own little business, because when I do have a business that's doing 80% of my income, autopilot, eyes closed, great. It's really hard for me to grow it. Sort of a diminishing returns phenomenon. And yet it's really hard for me to kill it. So it's like, okay, that's worth something. But to your point, if you just say, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 40 hours, I'd still be sitting on that one business saying, but I can't get it to grow. And sometimes it just won't. I love your idea of the event space. I think that's brilliant. And that's the thing that, as entrepreneurs, constantly just thinking of, as I tell people, I've been blessed to be an entrepreneur for 20 years, and I seem to find a way to continue to play. And it's like a video game. Like, okay, what do I do next? And this was working. And sometimes my wife will say, well, this was working a while ago. I said, yeah, it's not working now. And my dad's from the insurance industry, and it's such a steady industry. My gosh, you almost can't kill it if you're an insurance agency owner. And yet that was too boring for me. So I wanted a little more excitement. So here I am. What would you say, as kind of a wrapping it all together, if you look at the overall, where you've come with it, where you're going with it, do you really attract, or how do you then package this to the person that wants to be excellent, who's having a hard time, because, some people that want to be excellent, their version of excellent is, hey, Elon Musk. So it's 80 hours a week and it's the B word, it's billions. Okay, well, to me, you're probably not going to get that on 5 hours a day, and that's okay. But how do you find that person that really wants to buy into this, that's maybe going to be longer term, and then maybe to go with that? How do you know if you as the entrepreneur are wired for this, or versus like, or no, you shouldn't even try this? What's that decision point, or how do you define those two?
Well, I think that's sort of a misnomer, is that you couldn't become a billionaire by working 5 hours a week with that mentality. I think you absolutely can. I think people like, Elon Musk and, Cuban. Cuban wasn't a huge fan of the 5 hour workday, but he's not a fan of the 8 hour workday. I mean, he like works around the clock, and I'll throw stuff to him on the weekend at 11 o'clock at night, and he responds in 10 minutes. So the guy works around the clock, and he's a billionaire. Like, why is he even doing that? But some people have that higher capacity to do this. You were talking about some people have the capacity to be entrepreneurs. Some people have the capacity to work for 12 hours a day at a very high level in a knowledge working environment. But you're talking, I would say, about 5% of the population. You can't just sort of say, okay, everybody in the workforce now do this. They can't hold up, and there's going to be problems there. So your billionaires could do it. But I think it has very little to do with the 5 hour workday. And I don't think, and this was what failed in the 5 hour workday, is we weren't able to attract and retain people. Like, people didn't care about the 5 hour workday. They honestly, today, in my opinion, like, because, and we have a funny subsegment, but we're hiring people right out of school, where turnover is already pretty good. But it doesn't matter if I bring them in at 36. Now we've raised our minimum wage to 50,000 a year in its salary. But it doesn't matter if I pay them that or I pay them 80, a couple of years later, they'll be happy to come now, and they'll want to leave then. Like, the money, they don't care what they get paid. So that money has no motivation on getting people to work for you and attracting good people. That's number one. The second thing is the workday doesn't matter either. So if I give them a 5 hour workday, or Elon Musk gives them a 16 hour workday, doesn't matter. Do they want to work at SpaceX, and do they want to work at, Tower Electric Bikes? That is the interesting thing. Are they passionate about bikes, or the bike industry, or what you're doing there, or even the direct to consumer movement? Or are they passionate about technology? So those people that I get in, that they're coming in, that's why this sort of company culture and mission is so critical. That's how you bring in good people and retain good people. 5 hour workday failed for that, but I thought that would be a magic bullet, because to me, I was like, man, if I had this when I was coming out of school, I could go work at this company for 5 hours. I could make good money. I could, knock it out of the park, and I would still get raises. And then I would have all this free time to do, my other side businesses and stuff like that. So it would work perfect for me. I would never leave that company until my side business took off to such a degree that I was forced to say, this is foolish. They're spending, this much time on only 10% of my income. But that's not most people in the world. So I was designing it for those type of people. And God, I would love if I get people like that and just hold on to them for 5 years. That would be great. But I think another thing, and I kind of want to circle back to this was a benefit of the 5 hour workday for employers and stuff like that, and really for the knowledge working world, is this idea of so space to think. The idea of having, there's a reason that people, they sleep at night, they get up, and they have like ideas in the shower. It's because they've reset their brain. They've got, space to think. So even for your employees, for the employer, or if you're a, solo entrepreneur, or you have a small staff like me, I was able to diversify my business into all these things. And that's actually what saved the company going into the pandemic. I mean, the event space went to zero, but we were diversified. We had paddle boards and we had electric bikes. And fortunately, both of those had a boom from the pandemic a couple months into it. But the event space went to zero, but we're very well diversified now. And that diversification was because of the 5 hour workday. It's because I gave myself time to think, to do other stuff. Well, with employees, you're paying somebody a salary, they're a knowledge worker, and you're paying them for the quality of their ideas, basically. And so you give them that 5 hour day, and then they're off doing whatever. They're still having ideas. You're basically buying their brain for 24 hours, and you're forcing them to create space. Just focus on your job for this amount, and then create some space. And I'm telling you, that's actually going to work better. So when you get to the question of, can you make a, $1 billion, company with this 5 hour workday? I think maybe in today's world that moves so fast, where you need this space to think, maybe you can't in the old model. maybe you need a model like this where it's a focused work effort, and then give the creatives in your environment space to think, and they'll create other stuff, and they'll come up with amazing ideas.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much. I have learned so much just from listening to you talk. And what I just love is how grounded so much of your stuff is. You're not attached to it. Not, whether because it was the title of a book you wrote, or you see sometimes people are still trying to prove something that maybe that they tried. And as you said, it's an experiment. So it's nice to have people that are doing science, not just doing marketing. Marketing's great, but as opposed to just simply trying to prove something. So thank you for that. Where can people find out more about the book, the paddle boards, the bikes, no middleman? And we'll put the links for those who are watching. We'll also put them in the show notes.
Yeah. So you can find our social media. It's at Tower Beach Club. That encompasses our, not really just our event space, but it's an overarching for all the Tower brands, beach lifestyle companies, the Tower electric bikes, Tower paddle boards. And then obviously you can go to those websites. And if you want to reach, me or anybody on the staff, we're a very small company. So just going to the websites, our contact information is on there. You can reach us that way. If you're interested in the book, it's called The 5-Hour Workday. You can find that on Amazon, or you can, buy one of our paddle boards, our electric bikes, and the book will come with that. It's funny.
I like that. That's great. That's another way to get it.
We never intended to sell a lot of books, and I'm not an author. I didn't even think the book was going to be that good. But it actually ended up being a pretty, good book, interesting book. And we ended up selling maybe 3,000 copies. But I don't know how people make money in the book selling world, because it's just a labor of love, I guess, unless you're in the 0.111 or 0.001% of people who actually create a book and they sell 1 million copies of it. So we don't expect to sell a ton of copies. When we created this book, it was to put it in the paddleboard, get it out there, and get distribution. So at one point we said, well, screw it, we're just going to change it. We're just going to charge $100 for this book. And the weird thing happened. All of a sudden, people started to buy the book. It was like there was valuable information in this, and we would, sell 10 books a month or something like that. And I'm like, well, this is great. I'm making $1,000 by selling 10 books. And then it makes it more valuable to go buy our things. But we've stopped experimenting with that. We just put it down there, and I don't know what the price is of the book, but you can buy it on Amazon.
That's awesome. And one of the other things I think that I'd say about the book, when you're an author, or if you host a workshop, there's that idea of, gosh, if you can get one idea out of a workshop, which to me is almost kind of a sad, low bar to set. If you get a weekend workshop, you get one good idea. I'm like, I would hope I'd get more than one good idea. But like I would say about the 4-hour work week, like I'd say about the 5-hour work day, like I'd say about a lot of books I've read, while not everything might be perfectly dogmatically, forever, evergreen going to work, there's so many ideas I got from the book that if you're listening to this, it is one of the books you want to listen to, whether you would simply want to get more results in less time, or you want to create a better lifestyle. And, it still comes back to me, time abundance is like the money abundance. Money abundance doesn't fix everything. Neither does time abundance. If you have problems, you'll still have problems, but it's a lot nicer to have a lot more free time. It's a lot nicer to have a lot more money if you can. So thank you so much again for joining us. I really appreciate this. And for all you listening, as always, look forward to helping you create more money in less time, do what you do best, helping the people you can help best, and you can better enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks for listening.